It is only natural that the Backer family is still producing delicious potato chips after 75 years. Bacher, after all, is a German for baker, and the family has had a long history of making their living in the food industry. The early Backers came to Fulton and began operating a series of restaurants and cafes that served the downtown business area. By the 1920s, Bill Backer's father, Ernest, was part of a successful and profitable home cafe, a 20s-era Fulton landmark. How then did the Backers end up making potato chips when the family's future was so firmly tied to restaurants? The answer is a story of tragedy, innovation, entrepreneurship, and hard work. Bill Backer's father operated the home cafe in Fulton with the Frank brothers during the 1920s. Due to poor road transportation, towns like Fulton had to be self-sufficient in almost everything. The home cafe filmed an important niche as it provided services such as a bakery, bus stop, restaurant, as well as catering and other social events. Ida Backer was famous for her mutton recipe and Ernest for his baked goods. One of the popular side dishes offered was Saratoga chips. However, with the Depression came tragedy, as the cafe was burned down when a neighboring business committed arson in an attempt at insurance fraud. In better times, maybe the home cafe could have survived and rebuilt, but not during the height of the Depression. With the massive oven destroyed, the heart of the business was gone, and it took the hearts of the three men with it. The disaster devastated the Backer family, and like many Americans, it would take several years of desperate times before some hope of recovery would begin. Bill, what do you remember was the motivation to start the cafe, the family cafe?
Well, there's a bit of error in the write up there. It wasn't a Backer. Mel Frank and Louis Frank and my dad. So there were two Franks and a Backer in that, and that was located in smack downtown Fulton in a building that the bank owns now, right next to Taylor Jewelry. It was a two-story building. It extended over the top of the restaurant too, so it had what you might say 3/4 of the building. Well, in 1929, it was, as we were talking a while ago about Depression times, and the people that had the hardware store decided that they'd rather have the insurance money than the store, so they lit it off. And when they lit it off, well, it also took out the restaurant. And the restaurant was really quite an establishment because it was more than a restaurant. And this ties in with the roads transportation that we were talking about earlier. Towns, because the transportation was not there, a town of the size of Fulton was almost on its own for bread making, for ice cream making, for even candy making, cakes, bread, anything of that nature. So the restaurant also had a twin business to it, which faced over on Bluff Street, right across from the current police station, and it was a full-blown bakery with a brick oven. And this oven that they had would hold about 25 or 30 full-grown sheep. And that's where the Callaway County mutton was cooked for many years, in that oven. And along with baking the sheep, which once it's done is called mutton, well, there were sweet potatoes and there were Irish potatoes and there were carrots that were baked right along with it. So it was quite a meal and really, really good. So that was part of the restaurant bakery complex. They did a lot of catering too. They farm sales or whatever, well, they would cook up all of the food that was going to go out there, the whole kit and caboodle. Everything was made right there. There was a soda fountain, the old Trulia soda fountain. They also had the ice cream, which was made in the back of the restaurant in those big White Mountain machine, probably hand cranked. They had cakes that they'd made. They had donuts that they'd made. They had potato chips. here we go, that they'd been made in the back of the building. What am I leaving out?
So was it
Candy, homemade, relatively homemade. Had the whole works. That goody stuff was on the north side. And then you go through a lattice work, just wide enough, a passageway wide enough for maybe 2 people. And then the restaurant was behind that. One thing that I particularly remembered funny, my dad was with the catering deal at a farm sale one day, and this old farmer came up to him, and they used to make little individual pies, about yay big. You don't see them, I don't think you see them anymore. But anyway, this farmer bought this pie, and he stood there eating that pie, and he looked at my dad, and Dad asked him, "How is it?" He said, "Oh, it's good, tastes good, but the crust is awful tough." Dad said, "Well, you're eating the plate along with the pie." My dad had what at that time was called a nervous breakdown because of this fire deal. Pretty well put him out of business, put all of them out of business. And there was about 2 years that he would go from doctor to doctor, finding what now would be a Valium, clear down into Texas and whatever, looking for a doctor that would help him. Nobody ever really helped him, but he finally came around, and when he did come around, he said, "Well, I have to make a living some way." My mother had been running a beauty shop, fixing women's hair to kind of put the food on the table for that time. And then in 1931, we were living in the country down on Hillers Creek in a log cabin with no water, no gas, no electricity, no services really of any kind. But anyway, he had the slicer from the bakery, a little slicer from the bakery, kind of wired it to a post in a little outbuilding there. Bought 50 pounds of potatoes. I was 9 years old. I remember helping hand peel those first 50 pounds of potatoes. And because of the tie-in with the bakery, where there was also donut kettle available, my granddad built him from a barrel, just a barrel, a stove to set that donut kettle on. And he used a shortening called Bakelite, which is a highly hydrogenated shortening, which is on the no-no list nowadays. But it was good stuff, really good stuff for that time. So the first chips were made in 1931. And the first chips were sold, not in Fulton, but they were sold to another bakery in Jefferson City, Boyd's Bakery, right uptown on High Street. Of course, that bakery's not there anymore. The building still is. I know exactly where it was. They were friends of my dad because of being in the bakery business. So that was the first customer. It kind of outgrew, well, it outgrew the building that we were in. And then through the wartime, 41 through 46, actually the chips came out of St. Louis. And Oviena had made the chips for us. We packaged them. They did not have our name on them, didn't have any name on them, just potato chips, delicious or whatever.
My understanding was actually a
You know it as
renovated
well as I do.
barn that had been built during the war,
Before. Well, yeah,
Before the
during,
war?
during, yeah.
to house animals. And then when the sons came back, it was renovated to be the chip factory.
Is that the one we see in the picture?
That's the one in the pictures and
the
on the
little hog
wall.
right here on the wall.
Yes. But they came by the food and baking business. It was a heritage thing. I mean,
That's
the
right.
name would have indicated they had been
Yeah.
in the baking business for ages.
Forever, yeah.
My granddad, baker, whatever, was a baker. And his brother, Sam, had a little restaurant down on 4th Street about where the present post office is now. And he had an oven, not this big oven, but he had an oven in there, and he made bread. He also had a restaurant. My granddad, and who was Frederick, everybody called him Fritz, and my uncle, I guess Uncle Sam, they worked together in that little restaurant and bakery there. My great-grandparents were living with my grandparents here in Fulton, and they were just kind of live-ins, you might say, not furnishing any income. There wasn't any Social Security or any other programs at that time. So my dad said, you folks could make your own living, if you will. And he showed them how to make potato chips. It went backwards. My dad showed them how to make potato chips. So they did, went back to Springfield, Illinois, and they made potato chips in their kitchen. And that little peeler that you see there was their peeler, not his. And my granddad, Valentine, would take those little bags of chips, and go to the factory lunches, stand by the gate when the guys would come out for their lunch, and he'd sell them a nickel or dime bag of potato chips. And they did make their own living for a few years doing exactly that. So that peeler that you see was from the Valentine operation. But anyway, I came back from the Navy. My dad just said, work here, wants you. Even though I had a chemistry background, education. And you have the homesick situation, been away from home for a strong 2 years. And so I wasn't too hard to convince. And then brother, Fred, came back from the Navy, and he was a cook and a baker in the Seabees, Navy, Seabees. And he wanted to go into the baking as a business. So because he was a Navy history, he got a sugar allotment, and sugar was still not available. Even after the war, not available. So he went into the angel food cake business and made a lot of angel food cakes. Good, they were good. He did not do the delivering of them though. I would run my route in Mexico on a Monday, potato chips. I would come back and load up with angel food cakes that evening or the next morning, and I'd go back to Mexico with a load of angel food cakes. And I'll tell you, they sold like, well, hotcakes, because there was no sugar. People couldn't make them at home, so those angel food cakes were really popular, really popular. Okay, I'd run a route in Jeff City then on Wednesday, and next day I'd go back with a load of cakes. So chips and then cakes. Never charged him a dime for any of that delivery. And then the sugar became available, and the housewives went crazy, making their own cakes and cookies and whatever. So the angel food cake thing is, boom! I mean, just like just like a chunk of lead. It just died. And I told him, I said, Fred, quit making them, because I was picking them up moldy, you know, and bringing them back. And so, quite frankly, a good part of the money that he had made making those cakes, he blew it trying to stay in and replacing those moldy cakes. Well, we needed more help. My dad had broken his wrist. He wasn't capable of doing a delivery job, so we brought Fred into the potato chip thing with us then. And that would be about 1948, somewhere along there. Our name got changed. When I went to the Navy, our name got changed. I went in as a baker and I came out as a backer. Well, the first chips were delivered in this folks had a 1931 Chevy, just a passenger car. And that had to be the first machine that they were delivered in. Went from that to a 1935 Plymouth passenger car again. And the next thing that was acquired was a 1937 Dodge humpback panel, identical for all practical purposes to the 1938 that's sitting over here. It had been bought in Columbia from a fellow by the name of Glenn Marble. It had on it marble, like a thing you flip around, you know. Marble Distributing, and he'd sold Hellman's mayonnaise and cheeses and whatever. And my dad bought that from Glenn Marble. It never had the backer signs on it. The bag or chips did not have the backer name on them until late 46 or 47. And I put the name on the bag.
The best I know of the story, the Golden Girl happened when we were in the factory downtown on 5th Street. The factory was in the basement, and on the first floor were rental spaces, which included a beauty salon. And I don't know how you decided we needed an addition to our cloud logo, but it seemed to be required, or needed, or wanted, or whatever. And it should be a person and a female. So Dad went up the steps to the beauty salon, borrowed some of the books, or maybe just looked at them right there, and selected, I guess she was a clip art, because sort of,
Yeah.
now it would be called a clip art. And she was chosen. And we've all been accused of being the Golden Girl over all these years. I don't know what year she appeared on the package, but her hair would either be yellow because of the yellow tint in the window.
Right.
At that time we had a windowed bag, you could see the chips.
Right.
And if it was a barbecue bag, the tint was orangish. And so she would have red hair. It was interesting how that worked out, but no one really, got bothered about it being orange or yellow, even though it's a golden curl.
All right, now talk about the mystery of the marketing and the reason for that face being on there. When you focus in on somebody, when I turn around here and look at Barbara, you know what I look at first? You know what I see first? A pair of eyes. A pair of eyes. And you don't want to ever forget that. I mean, if you want an ad that will stand out, put a pair of eyes on it. It doesn't have to be a girl, doesn't have to be a fella. It can be a dog, be a cat, but you're going to look at those eyes. most hairstyles go out of fade. Her hairstyle is permanent. It's always in style. It's always in style. It's in style today. It was in style when I put it on there. Put her on there. What we're doing is trying to get people to focus on that pair of eyes, on that face, on that bag, pick it up and take it home with them. And I think it worked.
Oh.
Huh?
Oh yeah, it did. Absolutely.
And
I remember all your advertising logos.
And she's back on there now, right now, as the 75th.
Yeah.
As the 75th, and we have people in the business, our own business, that want to keep her on there. And now, is she going to stay on there, Vic?
From humble beginnings in a country barn growing to today's modern manufacturing operation, the Backer family has successfully adapted an ever-changing and often salty market. Their hard work has ensured the Backer's potato chip still continues to produce and market their delicious brand of chips across the nation, emerging as one of the largest privately held snack food manufacturers in the Midwest.